Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Soulganize Your Life podcast. This is where we talk about the fact that the outer circumstances of life will often stimulate our inner environment, but in two different ways. One is through what I call as a therapist, the psychological ego, and the other way is through our divine soul connection to all that is. So, why is it important to know the difference? Well, that's where our guests come in. They help us discern these inner conflicts, these two different perspectives within ourselves, and help us integrate it into one full human, messy, beautiful experience. And my guest today is someone that I have been counseled by. Her name is Deidre Morgan. And I experienced a wonderful numerology session from her. Even as a numerologist myself, she offered me so much more. And I know you do way more than that. And, I just would love for you to jump in and just speak about your journey.
Oh, well, it's been quite a journey, lifelong. But how about we start with getting in touch with what the ego is and how it differs from the soul? Because basically, that's the ongoing inner battle we're dealing with, whether we're conscious of it or not. But it's what's going on right now. And I would ask you to think of the ego as a human construct.
Yep.
It's something we each create, which the good news is it's finite. It has a shelf life.
Yes.
And we determine the shelf life.
Yes.
But the ego is basically something I believe we created, not consciously. It just evolved. It was organic to living in the third dimension, which is a dimension that's based in pain and suffering to grow. A terrible paradigm. But the ego we created in order to feel safe and secure in the world.
When did you first come across your own ego?
Have no idea. But that's because I'm a crystal. And I've come in to, as I've been taught and trained and heard 1,000 times, to help my friends help themselves. So my background is largely one of when did I create an ego? Because the crystal's job, which is, and we've been around since, the 40s, is to mirror for our friends who they are. So you don't get a strong ego.
Gotcha.
You've got to be shifting gears according to the company you keep. I studied for years with Nancy Tappy. Now, Nancy's probably her most famous student is Lee Carroll.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I didn't know Lee. I came in to Nancy's circle after he had left, but he got most of his training from Nancy.
Wow.
So I do pay attention. And anyway, I think, though, if I had to put a date on when I became something isn't right, I've got to do something. That was what I call my soul call. And that was one morning during my marriage, unfortunately. I woke up and said, who am I? What am I doing? Where am I? And it was really interesting because I've been resisting that question for years. I mean, in college, I always remember going into the bookstore, and they always had prominently displayed Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. And I looked at that book and just was literally physically repelled. I wanted nothing to do with it. Okay. And then this morning that I woke up, I went to the bookstore and bought it.
Wow.
Now, I can't explain to anyone what happened. It's just, I believe I had a soul call that said, enough of this game.
So before that, had you a sense that you were a separate being, or had you always known? I know you said when you were younger, you started to understand what intuition was. So what was that like for you?
I am what was labeled when I was in training, and I studied for 6 years to get my ministerial papers in interpersonal counseling and alternative healing. What I came to realize was I'm what's I'd called a natural psychic. I think everybody thinks so,
Yeah.
but I do. And they don't,
No.
most
No.
don't run off intuition. They don't run off their gut. They have a linear, logical, rational mindset, which there have been moments, trust me, that I've envied greatly. I could use a little more. However, I just thought everyone was intuitive and sensitive.
What was that like for you as a kid? What, like, help the audience understand the difference, that we don't understand. What was it like for you when you say intuitive?
Well, I could sense what people were really feeling. I sensed their energy. Intuitive is about not looking at the physical form or just listening to the physical words we speak or the tone. Intuition goes beyond that to the energy of things. It's the energy by which we create everything, whether it's our body, our career, our health. It's the energy we're holding.
So you didn't need necessarily to create an ego for safety because you could intuitively understand who you could trust and when based on the feelings you were getting from them.
And I grew up in what we would probably consider quite an unsafe family structure.
Okay.
So I was tuned in to watch the energy of my parents, to know which way the wind was blowing on any given day. And what I would do would be adjust to it and play to it.
Okay.
So that's egoless. It's not healthy always, because as I grew up and went into the outside world, I was too much of an accommodator, a pleaser. And I, one level, we could say, yes, you were on your spiritual assignment, but then we need to balance the spirit and the human within us. And the human was losing out fast.
Okay.
So I was very, very happy. My former husband really did me a great service by being the way he was and being so linear and logical and rigid. That allowed me to create my own greater sense of self and to live it.
Interesting.
So the marriage did not end well, and it was a very difficult, bitter divorce, but it was a gift. And so people say to me, have you forgiven him? There's nothing for me to forgive.
Yeah.
It was part of our contract together. At least I like to think so. And I ended up being able to expand my consciousness to come into this kind of work of lifting your spirit. So it plays a very active and maybe even dominant role in your life.
So before that day where you woke up and you're like, what am I doing in this marriage? This is not, I don't know if you ever heard that song where he says, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife, the Talking Heads.
No.
It's hilarious. He says that basically I woke up and he's like, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here? Like, it's a great song.
The only issue was I knew how I got there.
Yeah. So how did you get there? I mean, what would you define that life like where you were trying to have maybe the marriage with the picket fence and the kids and the
what it was really seeking, and I think this is what we universally seek because we're spiritual beings of love and joy. And so we're always seeking that connection and the activation of it within us. Most of the time, though, we look outside ourselves. And that's the third dimension.
Yes.
Which is because the gift, once we master third dimension, it's about becoming your own power and authority and loving yourself enough to be who you are in the world. regardless of what the world is saying and doing.
And so do you believe, you said you sort of always were intuitive, and you're a crystal, and you kind of came in during this time period, which I believe is the movement from the third dimension to the fourth dimension. Like you said, we would learn through pain, suffering, ego, beliefs, division. And now we're trying to learn through love, giving and receiving, which is a huge like deconstruction of the old systems and building new ones. Maybe speak, if you don't mind, a little bit more about what the difference looks like to you, because you sound like you're already living it and aware of it, what we're going to.
Yeah, well, what the third dimension, of course, is what I call separatist, and we all focus on me, I, being strong, independent, all those good things. But we separate ourselves. And we have that ego that is the defense mechanism, the protective mechanism is what I call it. So we can maintain who we are, which is all illusion. But what we've done is we've shut off the heart. Because in the third dimension, the divine feminine has become a second-class citizen.
Oh, okay.
If we just look historically and socially at how women have been treated, we say this isn't right, and the feminine was just degraded,
looked down upon,
definitely second class. And that to me has created a tremendous imbalance within. And so we've evolved enough. You can say women's lib, you can say the influence of world wars, where women had to step out and step up in society. There's all sorts of events that happened, but women began to see themselves differently, and we began to see ourselves as really pillars of strength. And once that happens, then the heart begins to beat a little. And the name of the game right now is to move out of the closed heart, the heart we had to shut down, the emotions. Think of it, the emotions have been poo-pooed for centuries. So the fourth dimension is about getting in touch with the heart again, which is why so much of the therapists or life coaches or soul coaches, whatever we want to label it, have focused on healing the emotional wounds from unmet needs from childhood. We have to heal those wounds for the heart to take I call it, take the cotton batton off the heart. So once that's done, which many, many people are going through and have accomplished, we begin to feel again.
Yeah, I'm getting an analogy of like picturing myself, giving and trying to give birth to my kids, and how absolutely painful I know it was, but I don't remember it, and it's healed. And like once they're out, it's, so I think what you're saying, the analogy is a lot of people are still so focused on the pain that they went through rather than seeing the gifts that it brought them. And you're saying what we're trying to do is help move people through that first. You have to move through the pain first and acknowledge, like, yes, that actually was painful. And then the next step, and you were telling me before we got on about your empowerment program and the 6 steps. And so maybe this is a good time for you to sort of bring in that first step, because you said it is about emotional healing.
It is. And the thing to realize, and I'm sure this is a lot of what your therapy is about and coaching, it isn't enough to just have talk sessions anymore.
No, which is why I'm doing this podcast. That's why I'm doing this podcast. It's not going to work.
This is the nasty part of any journey work. I don't care what format you use.
Yes.
Now we have to go to the emotions.
That's right.
And I've come to the conclusion that we avoid that because underneath, whether it's anger, rage, bitterness, resentment, any low vibe emotion that is unpleasant to experience. I'm not diminishing it, But underneath that layer is the feeling of helplessness and
Mm,
hopelessness. And
mm.
to me, this is the crux. You have to allow yourself to feel helpless or hopeless, whichever.
Oh,
In
that sounds so painful.
well, yeah, it took my breath away a couple of times. You know, you have to sit there and then you have to say, yeah, that was so. And that was me then. This is now. I'm not there. And
Mhm.
I always ask my clients, how did it make you stronger and wiser?
Mm.
Because all these pains, emotional, mental, physical, they have a gift because that is the nature of our, um, I guess I'll say, planet.
Yes.
Duality reigns. So if there's a horrible, unpleasant, yucky moment, there's the equivalent is
Yeah.
there.
And this
And
is so to your point, like this is what I want my clients to know is that we can talk about this all day, but the trauma or emotion you're experiencing is stored somewhere else. And
right.
we need people like you who can either mirror that back to us, like you said, as a crystal, or as my Reiki master does. I ask her just to take the garbage out, like just take it out. Like let's look at it and it's let me cry it out and then take it out. And I don't really need to spend a whole lot more time on that. And that is what I hope this does in this podcast is to bridge that understanding of you're coming to talk about it and become self-aware, but there's so much more you have to do next. You really do.
Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah,
otherwise you're going to be in therapy for 20 years.
you have to be willing to experience
Yep.
the worst. I mean, in our
Yes.
minds, it's
Yes.
the worst. So once you
Yes.
experience that, you're healed. In my first, I have 2 levels of empowerment program
Yeah.
now. And the first thing I always do is I use my numerology to read the spiritual contract.
Yes.
That gives a person, one, an overview of their life, their purpose,
Mm-hmm.
what they set up and they get. I've set up this contract. I set it up. I agreed to it. And what do I need to, how do I grow this lifetime? How am I going to contribute? It answers those questions. And I
Mm-hmm.
like doing that first because, two, a person gets a sense of who I am. They get a sense of, will I be comfortable working with this woman?
Mm.
Will I be able to tell her the truth and not, code it a bit or ignore it? Uh,
Yes.
and I think that's essential.
Yes.
I think the link or the connection we have with any therapist or coach has to be one we feel complete trust and respect in. Otherwise, it's not going to
Right.
work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we do the spiritual contract as sort of a preliminary. And then the first experience, we jump right in and do what I call the psychic wound.
Mm.
And this is an experiential process where we learn when and where and what wound broke your trust that you
Broke
had
yourself in
yourself and with the
yourself.
universe.
Okay.
Yourself and with the universe.
That is a deep thing you just said because that is really what is happening.
Mhm.
There's
Yes.
and then we're exploding all over the place saying I don't trust you and cancel you and I hate you and you're wrong. And I mean that what you just said was such a moving thing. I almost want you to repeat it again. You said it's like the first moment we go back to that and it could be 3 years, it could be 3 years old. I mean, I don't know, right? It could be really
So this
unconscious.
is Jungian in concept.
Hmm.
Carl Jung said there are 3 universal, meaning everyone goes through it, experiences humans have that, well, basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, create the mess we create.
Okay.
The first one is when we leave God and enter the womb. The second, he said, was when we leave the womb and come into this life.
Okay.
And the third was somewhere between the ages of 2 and 6. So
Hmm.
you were right on the mark there. It could be as early as 3
Hmm.
that we experience some emotional disappointment, hurt, trauma for some people.
Yes.
That is the event that breaks our trust in the world, in people, and primarily ourselves. Because we, at that tender age, and I don't care whether it's 2 or 6, we're still tender.
Yes.
We don't have the tools and equipment to take care of ourselves.
Right.
When we go through the experience, there is a helplessness that we lose our breath on, and
Yes.
we carry with us. So the first appointment session is diving right in to learn what your psychic wound is, and then we proceed to build on it. We do an inner child experience to see what the inner child is saying to you. We do, oh, yes, I love this one. We do the underminer, which is what triggers you and gets you off center in the world, in your performance.
Yeah.
Primarily. And we also then, I begin by having people make, this is about the 4th or 5th session. It all depends. Some clients need to talk. They need to talk. They need to cry. They need to shout. And it's, as far as I'm concerned, that's all legitimate and all healing. And I really admire the people who can do this, to be vulnerable and yet be open, because they're going to get healed. They're going to move through it all. But what I have, the first step I have is to ask people to make a list of 20 qualities they like about themselves. Now, I thought that's pretty easy.
No.
You would be surprised the number of people that can only maybe list 10 or 12, maybe 15. We sometimes take a session to build it up to 20.
Wow.
But those of people who have experienced lack of support, emotional support in their childhood, or they've been taught not to think well of themselves. You know, my mother used to say to me, I'm your best friend and severest critic. If you don't think I had a hard time coming up with 20 qualities, the first I did. Because it was never enough, not good enough, and I really imprinted the lack mentality.
Yeah, that's what I would call the ego, right? Is the influence of people with good intentions kind of telling you you're not quite enough, you know, so you need to garner these things. And then we take it seriously, and we do, you know, and to your point, like in therapy, right? Like you might be talking about what's currently happening to you, or maybe what happened to you when you're 18, right? But not necessarily what happened to you when you were 2. And that's why I love Freud and the ego, because, you know, talking to people about their childhood and they'll keep going, you know, no, nothing happened. And like, well, something did. Something happened. I don't care if you're, you know, the wealthiest person in the city and you have everything going for you. Like, there's something that needs to be healed, and don't feel embarrassed that, you know, it was that time when you, to your point, where you lost trust in people because they hurt you. It's like, everybody has that. There's not a single person on the planet that doesn't have that. You can't go through this life without that.
Listen, the ego, believe it or not, is what keeps us alive. So it has its light side. It's just the dark side that's based in fear and doubt.
Yes.
Yeah, and we need to release. But ego's our friend in many ways. You know, the ego, if we see a snake, you know, the ego's going to say, stand still, or be careful, or don't move, or whatever they're going to do. The ego wants us to survive.
Yes. My very first podcast, the guy called it the intrinsic ego. And he goes, I need to know where to put the spoon to feed this thing, you know, and he, you know, and that's really what I hope people get down to, is that they heal the parts that cause suffering and then integrate the fact that they are a persona, or they have a personality, and they're here to do something specifically as the person they created, and then get rid of all the other stuff.
Right.
which is what they can do with you.
Well, yeah, it's about getting rid of doubt and fear, basically.
Mhm. What are the
And recognizing there are some things we should respectfully fear.
Yeah.
That's the ego too. So it's just getting in touch with the ego. But more importantly, it's saying, yes, I've got an ego. It is my persona. It is valuable,
Mhm.
but it's coming from my soul, because
Mm.
ultimately soul and ego are going to merge and
Yeah.
be one too.
Yeah. So how
That's
do you walk people through that process?
Well, that all depends, because every person has their own contract, two, their own timeline.
Mhm.
Depending on it, just depends on how they walked through the first level of the empowerment program.
Oh, okay.
Then it's what would I say? I created according to that person.
Okay.
But the level two is getting the person to be comfortable, happy
Mhm.
with who they are, happy
Mhm.
with their life. And you'd be surprised. Most people are not comfortable. They feel awkward, they feel guilty, they
Mhm.
may be ashamed, they may have been, when they were happy and thought well of themselves, they may have had a parent who said, you're too big for your britches, or who do you think you are?
Mhm.
A quiet put down that absolutely crushes the expression of the heart and soul, because
Mhm.
the heart, from my point of view, is the voice of the soul.
Mm.
So it's all slowly coming together to
Yeah.
say, we are whole, we are complete, we are one.
Yes.
With-
But we want
and,
to. But we
and
want to
once,
have a human experience, and we want to have emotions.
yes, but
Yeah.
their emotions are valuable. It's just we need to be in the upper case emotions.
Yes.
The love, the joy, the happiness, the excitement, the enthusiasm, all those wonderful things.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
who are there any particular types of personas that work really well with you, or are you open to working with anyone anywhere in the world?
Anywhere in the world, anyone. I figure if someone contacts me, there's something for us to
Mhm.
interchange and relate to.
Yeah. And do you learn from everyone also?
Always.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, um, it's, as I say, it's a lifelong journey. It
Yeah.
really is. Uh, I don't get quite as nervous as I used to. I
Mm.
don't get quite as, can I help this person to help themselves? See,
Yeah.
I'm not here to help you. I'm here to help you help yourself.
Yes, for sure.
And then you become self-reliant, and you begin to feel more confident about yourself. You feel more whole. And then all those good things start to bubble up, what I call the joy bubbles.
Hmm.
Being ourselves. We're enjoying being with ourselves.
Yeah. I know
And
also if someone wants to find out more about what you do Zoom in with, right?
I do, I have a Monday night talk on Zoom coming up. If
Yeah.
anyone's interested, they can
Is that,
email.
and that's regular, right? That's a regular thing you do.
It's the first Monday of every month.
Hmm.
And well, it's about an hour. I try not to go over.
Yeah. What could
I'm,
they expect? I mean, is that like a way for people to get introduced to you?
no, I would say tune into the pop-ins that are
Okay.
about,
Those are different.
yeah, pop-ins. They offer very practical, quick tips for navigating the current month and the current quantum field that we're in, and
How
how.
do, and how would someone find that?
Well, it's on YouTube, but again, I think it's best if they just contact me at Deirdre Insights at gmail.com.
Okay. And then you also have
It's
a website called Deirdre's Insights.
.com.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And are you on LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
I have someone else who runs that because, to be honest, I'm not techie at all.
No, we
As
want you to stay intuitive and connected that natural way, not the, yeah. Well, I can only tell our audience my own personal experience with you was amazing. Just getting a numerology reading. So I know you even just, will just do that for people that maybe have been exploring
Yes.
numerology and
Or
would.
sometimes they want the soul gift reading, which is a very fun, lighthearted reading about
Okay.
the aspects of yourself that are going to be most supportive, really support you in accomplishing your goals for the coming year. It's a very short, fun, great. Everyone loves it. You walk out happy.
So
It's
that
just,
might be a good thing for them to know, because it's going to be probably December when your podcast comes out, and that's a good time to do that before the new year.
yes. Oh, yes. And
Yeah.
the annual reading is really for people who are dedicated or are really committed to expanding their consciousness and
Yes.
lifting the planet, because it goes into very specific detail of every aspect of yourself, where you are with yourself particularly after 2024.
Yeah.
Because it made very dramatic changes and had a couple of upheavals in one or two areas anyway. So this reading sort of brings you up to date from your soul's point of view, because I read the tarot deck on that, where you are with yourself, what's next, what to keep an eye on, what to love, and what maybe needs a little more TLC.
Okay. Well, I hope that, people listen to this in December and maybe consider that as an entry point to you too, is through like getting just a reading or going onto the pop-ins and just sort of thinking about what do I want from 2025. And that would be great. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me. I've loved being with you, and take good care and have the happiest of holidays.
Yeah, you too. I hope you have a great rest of today even.
I will.